Hello, welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina. I'm the host of Fiberchats. If you're new to my channel, welcome. If you already a subscriber, love having you back. And today my guest is Astrid Tauber. Hi, Astrid.
Hello, I'm so glad to be here.
Thank you. So I have to ask you a question that I never asked a single guest of mine. How old are you?
I am 12 years old.
And you already have been a fiber artist for 5 years.
Yes, that is correct.
So how did you discover fiber arts? What was your first fiber art? Like, how did you start?
So I started when I was 7 years old. My mom signed me up for a course at Joann's that was, we learned to crochet and sew and knit. But the one thing that I really took to at first was crochet.
Okay.
Yeah, so then after that, everyone kind of goes down the rabbit hole, and it happened really quickly. I then learned to spin at a fiber festival in North Carolina a few years later. And then after that, I learned that weaving was the perfect medium for hand spun. And then, looms started multiplying and growing in size. And then here we are today.
So when you started crocheting first, let's start with that, right? What attracted you to crochet, do you think?
I don't know, maybe it was the color, maybe it was the way to do all kinds of stitches. I'm not sure, probably the color.
And anybody in your family crochets?
No, I'm the only person in my family who does anything related to fiber arts.
Do your parents ever ask, like, where did we go wrong?
No, I don't think so. I'm homeschooled, so my learning is fueled by my interests.
Right. And do you teach your mom how to do stuff? Like, is she interested in learning from you?
Not much. She definitely learns from listening to me talk about it because, I have to talk to someone about everything that goes on in my head. But so she learns from that, but I think that's about it.
So is that why you started Instagram, to have the audience with whom you can talk to?
Yeah.
And now it grew to like 2,000 followers, right?
Yeah, I'm actually close to 3,000 now.
Oh my God, that's so amazing. So now you got into the weaving. How did that happen?
So for Christmas one year, my mom got me a shacked cricket rigid heddle, and I went to my local guild and they taught me how to warp it from start to finish. And I didn't really use it much until we actually got into the pandemic. I did like maybe 1 or 2 projects on it, but then once we were started with quarantine, I really got invested in it and I started using it so much. That was when really became a night owl. Like I really started to stay up. I would weave all through the night almost, and like I would warp it one night and then by the morning there would be a scarf.
So when you weaving, right, like how did you learn? Like, is that all on your own? How do you research like new techniques, new ideas? Like, where do you get them from?
My first mentor was Kelly Casanova, and she is an amazing rigid heddle teacher. I definitely wouldn't have the foundation I have today without her.
Are you still like, are you always in touch?
Yeah, very so much until very recently. Now I have gotten more invested into floor loom courses because I don't really use my rigid heddle very much anymore. But yeah, we stay in touch.
So you also started YouTube channel.
Yes.
How did you decide to start that?
It was mostly that I had when I went to fiber festivals, and I wanted to do longer videos and just working through my vlog and stuff. And so that was how I got into that I really started doing that. And me and my friends do a lot of stuff now on my YouTube too.
So, how do you meet your fiber friends?
Um, Mostly through Zoom. I take an online course through OutSchool, which is a teaching program mostly for homeschool kids. That I have this class called Spinning Tales that my teacher. We're very international. The other student who's probably my best friend at this point lives in Panama, and then the teacher lives in London, and so we're from all over the place, and that's kind of the best place where we can come and just spend an afternoon and, you know, hang out and just do our own thing.
So how do you decide, like, you on any particular day? Are you gonna weave today? Are you gonna spin today? Are you gonna crochet today? Like, what? How do you alternate between those?
Um, well, it depends what's on the loom. If like I have the yarn for the loom or whatever weaving is set up on the loom. Um, Typically it's kind of just whatever is either like due first or it's like really in my head that I really want to get it done as like as soon as possible, and just to complete that overall image that's in my head and to create that. um, Other than that, yeah, it's pretty much that. Normally I don't have a huge rush to stick to one versus the other.
Right. And I saw this reel of yours. So was it it was either reel or it was the IGTV, but about you visiting Glass Beach and getting inspiration from what you saw there and creating fabric that like represented the waves and the glass and the stones. Is that how you usually get inspired, by nature, or how do you draw your inspiration? Where do you get your ideas from?
Yes, typically I draw inspiration from all kinds of nature. I do some of my projects are just based off a course that I'm taking. But lately it's been I've been obsessed with pictures of birds with tons of natural colors. And so I've been mostly doing projects based off that. And I would like to do a lot more garments with inspired by lots of birds and tropical birds and all kinds of birds.
So you make a fabric and then you sew with that, like you're making garments out of it?
Yes, a little bit, but hopefully more in the future.
So what's the most like difficult thing you've done?
Um, Probably, well, I know every weaver, it's like when you start to cut into hand woven, that's like the scary bit. Um, but definitely starting to work with my hand woven is and sewing that a lot more is definitely very scary. But I recently this project that I have here, this is a project for Hand Weavers Guild of America. They hold Convergence next year, which is their big national weavers conference. And so this has two pieces. This has a garment and a shawl, and that I've been, this has been something that I've been working on a lot recently and sampling all kinds of things. There has been other things, but one of them is in an article that I can't share yet. So
We'll wait for that.
yes.
um, so when you put all the threads in, like, do you use mostly hand spun or do you use commercially spun yarn as well?
Not much hand spun in my weaving actually. I would love to do more, but it takes a lot more time to spin the yarn than it weaving. Just it flies through the yarn so fast that I don't feel like I'd have enough time to even spin that much yarn to do projects. Sometimes I do set maybe like one or two specific projects for a year that would use hand spun for the majority of that. But mostly I'll use weaving yarns.
Okay. And so when you spin yarn, do you have a favorite fiber?
Um, There's a lot of fibers, mostly fine fibers. I like all kinds of fibers that are blended with silk. I like to blend my own fibers with silk. I have a Clemis and Clemis drum carder, but mostly fine things like merino. I love Polworth, especially because it's got the fineness of merino, but it's got a longer staple length, which makes it easier to spin and easier to get a thinner yarn.
Right. What's the thinnest you got?
I will be completely honest and say that I am not a person who tracks the thickness or thinness of my yarn.
So when you in that class with all the international students, do you learn stuff from them that you like wouldn't know otherwise living in the States?
Partially, yeah. My friends, they do all kinds of crazy projects, and I totally would not know anything about that. It's not something that I would typically research on my own, but it does want to make you get more invested seeing all the kind of cool things that they do based on cultures and historics that they're interested in.
Right. Any examples of that? Like, do you have any project stuck in mind that like you were blown away by the different culture?
So my teacher is invested a lot in more historical things like from Viking times and way back. And so she grows her own nettles, and she takes all the time to comb through that and everything. And she does everything. She takes the time to do everything the historical way. And that has been really interesting because personally, I would do weaving yarn rather than the historical version.
Right. Do you love, like, I know that you work a lot with different fibers, but do you have like the same love for animals? So, like, do you see yourself ever being on the, like, going from the sheep to the spinning to the loom, the whole thing, doing the whole process? Or are you more of a project kind of person?
I would love to do that. It is kind of like sometimes it's like, you just want to see the image, you just want to see it. And it almost feels like sometimes you're like, it's never going to happen if you take like, you start with just a big pile of like dirty fleece, and eventually that would become something. I'd love to do that, but I don't know that I would take the time to do that.
Where do you see, so like you progress so much in 5 years, right? Where do you see yourself going from here? Like, what's your ambitions? What's your dreams as far as fiber arts goes?
Well, it's very hard to say because the future has changed. Based on the past, the future has changed a lot. But so far, I think I would like to go to FIT in New York.
And study weaving.
Yeah, study weaving and designing fashion and basically everything involved in fiber arts.
Do you have any interest in like historical costume, or it's more modern and like what you can make?
Mostly more modern, yes.
Yeah. So you mentioned few fiber festivals. Do you like going to those, and why do you like going to those?
I love fiber festivals. There's just, you can't do everything virtual that you can in person, and going around and feeling a fiber. And there's just so many people there too that have so much expertise and skill that you can only learn from them by going and meeting all these people who have years of practice.
What was the favorite class you took at the fiber festivals?
Probably the one where I learned to spin in North Carolina.
So you left that class, like you came to class not knowing how to spin, right?
Yes.
And then you left the class and you felt like you had enough skills to like go on your own and spin, or you came home and you're like, okay, now I have to start learning.
So after that class, I later, my teacher was amazing. Later, I even went to her farm and learned to shear sheep. But she rents lendrums. And so I rented one of those, and she raises Shetland sheep, and so I purchased some of her fiber, and I just went home and took all this time practicing and getting a feel for it, and just really taking the time to learn that.
So how do you see yourself like different from that moment, right? When you first learned how to spin and your skill set now, like how much did you progress?
I remember we do summer road trips almost every year. And I remember one year I came back from the summer road trip. We wouldn't take the wheel on the trip. There wasn't enough room. But I came back and when I started spinning and I sat down to spin, it just all of a sudden was like so much finer. Like I just needed to like almost take a break to mentally practice that. And I've really been able to finesse the way that I can control it. And I now know like how to keep it consistent. And actually at one point someone told me that enjoy it while you can spin thick yarn, because you won't be able to do that forever. And it's true, once you master, you take so much time learning how to spin thin yarn, because that's what almost every spinner wants to learn. And now I don't know that I could spin a thick yarn if I tried to.
Do you ever stress about like weaving or spinning? Do you ever get under pressure that you have to like finish something on time, that you not getting what you want to get? Like, do you ever get frustrated with it?
I actually don't, because I'm one of those people that needs a deadline in order to function. Like if I don't have a deadline, I actually will not get anything done. So if I have a deadline, then I actually am very good at making sure that I do that in advance, and it'll be done in plenty of time in advance. But if I didn't, then it would be probably less.
Well, what kind of deadlines do you have? Like, what do you participate in as far as your fiber arts that you do have a deadline?
Well, normally I enter things into competitions at fiber festivals a lot, but sometimes it's deadlines that I set for myself. Sometimes it's if it's going into an article or a newsletter. It can be all kinds of things, but normally my projects are designated. Like normally when I plan projects, I plan them for a fiber festival or something like that. So it's kind of always been a scenario where they're going into something like that.
Do your like your friends that live around you, right? Kids your age, do they ever ask you like, why on earth are you doing all of that? Like, why won't you go and do what other kids do? Like, do you ever feel like an outlander?
Um, well, actually not much, because we move around a lot, and lately during the pandemic, we moved during the pandemic. So I haven't made any new friends much in this house or in this area. And it's kind of like I'm homeschooled. So all the homeschoolers, they're in a similar situations where they have their own unique thing that maybe other kids won't get that. And so even if they don't understand it, they appreciate it. But there's not even, I wouldn't say that there's a huge amount of kids that would say that now.
Right. What happens with all the stuff that you make?
Most of it I sell. I am not a person for nice things. I tend to stain almost everything I get. But it's not something that we usually would keep around the house here. So I sell most of it. And then it helps me go fund back into more yarn to create more things.
Right. And how do you sell it? Like, where do you sell it?
I sell everything on social media. So my Facebook or my Instagram.
And so, I mean, did you ever have trouble with that? Like the marketing part of that?
When I was like kind of starting with selling my work, I went to these Acton's children's business fairs, and one of the big problems was that you would go and some kids would be selling things for $5, and that's cool, that's what they do. but my things will be priced higher because I spent all that time and effort on it, and not everyone got that. But I don't have that as much now because now I sell on my social media where everyone follows me because they understand that it's a talent that I have.
Right. Do you ever feel like, yes, I'm talented, I'm like, I got somewhere, but there's so much more to learn? Maybe like there are all these other artists that charge the same amount that I'm trying to charge. Like, do you ever get doubts like that?
It will happen, but you know, I do what I do because I love it, not particularly to sell it or anything like that. So,
Do you give anything as gifts to like friends, family?
uh, not much actually. No, most of what I do, I just sell.
Right. Have anybody ever made you something like handmade gift for you?
No.
I have to talk to your friends. We have to chit chat with them. um, what kind of things do you usually like? So, like, I mean, if you're selling it, right? So you sort of, does it limit you as an artist because you know what sells, what harder to sell, what's easier to sell? Do you feel like you're becoming more concentrating on the marketing part of it, and that prevents you from being a true artist?
That depends. I really, one of my favorite things to do is to create, when I'm weaving, all kinds of drafts. So they have such intricate designs, and that actually tends to be what sells. That the simpler things don't actually sell as much as the more detailed things, which is kind of convenient because that's what I love.
Right. So when you price things, how do you come up with the pricing for it? Like, do you have a system? Do you have a formula of how you do that?
Um, for most things, it's, you know, it's the like, what did the yarn cost? How much time went into it? I'll also sometimes look on like Etsy and see what other people are selling similar things for. But I also have some things that I know that, like, if it's a dish towel that I made out of 8-2 cotton, then it'll be for this price, or that kind of thing.
Right. Um, do you have a dream project that's something like you know you're not ready yet for, but like you really want to do sometime in the future?
Not really. I feel like everything that I picture in my mind that I really, really want to do, um, I feel like I know, I like in my head, I know I have the skill to do it because I've studied this and I've spent so much time learning it, and I've done all of that.
Are there any other kinds of fiber arts that you see yourself dabbling in the future?
Um, Maybe a little bit more of dyeing. I'd love to dye my own yarn. It's one of the most creative ways that I can think of to work with color in more ways than I am right now.
So when you dye, you dye your own yarn now, right?
Yes, occasionally.
What kind of dyes do you use? Do you use the acid dyes or do you go with natural dyes?
I prefer acid dyes.
Why?
I don't know. It's just natural dyes. I know my friends in my spinning class, or my fiber class, they prefer natural dyes, and they're always trying to get me to do natural dyes. But I just prefer acid dyes because it's easier to perfect the color that you can see.
Do you feel like you a perfectionist in like a lot of areas?
Yeah.
That you like you need to have it precise, done
Yeah.
exact way, or otherwise you don't like it?
Yeah, definitely.
Does that help you with weaving, or that do you feel like you overcritical of yourself sometimes because of that?
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes I can definitely be overcritical. Um, but other times I know that, you know, even if it's not exactly the way I want it, that it's still perfect in everyone's eyes, even if it's not the way I wanted it to be.
Right. You mentioned one time in one of your videos that your brother helped you create some sort of gadget for your loom. Tell us the story. How did that happen?
So my brother is into all things creating. He has a 3D printer. He loves to do woodworking. So he often helps me on when I had my table loom, he would clip little hooks that I could then put a dowel with paper on it to help spool onto the warp. Now that I have this new loom, he helped me create something similar that is similar. It's pretty much the same thing, except it's on the floor instead of hooks onto the table. He helps me with all kinds of things that whenever he's probably the best brother, whenever I need something, he always knows how to design it, and he's always willing to help.
So do you share like your ideas with him? Is it just the technical part of it, or do you like, oh my god, like I saw this thing and I really want to make something? Like, do you chit chat with him about what you're actually creating?
Not as much. I know we may not completely understand everything, and this is both sided, I think, but we still agree that that's what we love, and we understand that that's what that is, but we may not understand every little detail of what we explain. So I probably discuss things more with my mom because we spend more time discussing that. But he doesn't understand that quite as much.
Do you feel like he ever like come up with some idea that you didn't think about how to improve your technology, your loom, your tools?
He's definitely got a brilliant mind, and I can't think of a certain scenario, but we definitely do this thing where we kind of bounce around, and one idea starts off one way, and then after a little discussion, it turns into something perfect and just solves whatever is the scenario just perfectly.
So you have this like room where you have your loom, you have your yarn. Does that room get crowded with all the things, like the longer you do it and the more things you experience with?
I'm a very organized person. So it doesn't, I tend to keep it minimal because I'm a minimalist. But some would say this is overcrowded, but it's still got plenty of room. It's for weaving, and so most of the time I'd just be sitting here weaving. I don't need space to have a room, so I just weave this.
How much yarn do you get? Like, do you get yarn only for specific projects? Do you just buy yarn because you see it and it's so pretty? Do you have some sort of budget for the yarn?
Usually it's for a specific project. Sometimes I'll just get like one cone because it's like the perfect color and I just love that color or something. And then eventually it'll get worked into a specific project that I'll then get more yarn for. And budget wise, it's usually just contained, like sometimes like this project here is a silk project. So that's my one big project for the year. That's the splurge. And then the rest of the year, it might be working more with cotton because that's on the cheaper side.
Do you have any fiber with like love-hate relationship that you like love the feel of it or something, but it's just like difficult to manage or something like that?
I say this to my friends, is brushed mohair, which is the very, very fuzzy, soft mohair. But when you weave with it, it's sticky. So that because of all those fibers, they stick together. And so I say, I hope to never have to work with it, even though it's really soft and fuzzy and really nice.
Do you have a favorite colors, something that you always come back to, or do you always love to experiment with different colors?
I do experiment quite a bit, but I love blue. So most projects incorporate blue into them.
Well, just happened to be my favorite color, so much so that like I got the nickname of Smurfette. So just because like last couple years, every project I was knitting, everything was blue, so people start making fun of me basically. So I'm trying now to knit with other things as well, like to step outside of my comfort zone. But blue definitely is one of the loveliest colors.
Yeah.
Um, when you sell your stuff, do you have like some sort of packaging that you do, some sort of note that you put in? Like, how does that sale happens if it's online? Like, how much effort do you put into presentation?
I always, if it's sometimes someone will note that it's in when we're messaging and she's purchasing. Sometimes they'll note that it's maybe it's their grandmother's 80th birthday. I had one time, and so then if it's a birthday or a special gift, I'll package it up nicely for a gift with boxes and that kind of thing. But typically, I'll just do my it's kind of like my signature, like tissue paper, tool, and a little specialized thank you for your order sticker with my logo on it.
Lovely. Do you have any other interests besides fiber art? Something you like very passionate about?
Um, Ballet. I was a classically trained ballerina for 8 years since I was 3. Recently, I've definitely invested my time into weaving more. I don't do that practice as much, but it used to be like 3 days a week, up sometimes 4 days a week. It used to be a lot of ballet.
So do you like when you weave, do you play music? Like, is that still part of your...
uh, Actually, not really. No.
So what's going on in your head when you weave? Like, do you have like, do you daydream? Do you concentrate on exact like what's happening under your fingers? Like, where is your mind at that time?
If it's like depending on what the project is, always. If it's got it's called a floating selvage, where it is in the middle of your shed and it helps you control your selvages. Then it's always like making sure I use my thumb to pick it up and making sure that it always goes over and under. Other times, if it's more complicated with the draft, it'll be like, what is my foot like? And then I'll count, and then I'll look down and I'll count. And always just feeling with the treadles. I used to work a lot more with the table loom. It's only recently that I have a floor loom. So I'm still getting very used to the treadles. And so it's mostly a lot about that.
Do you feel like the fact that you are a ballet dancer and obviously like you have a good sense of rhythm, like do you feel like it helps with the weaving?
I definitely have a lot of mobility and I'm very flexible. So that does help with strength in my feet, because if you're lifting a lot of the shafts, they can get very heavy. So definitely, yes.
Do you ever need help of like adults, or this is your room, nobody is coming in and you like self-managing the whole thing?
My mom helps me wind on my work. She holds tension on them while I wind. And but other than that, it's kind of like if I'm focusing on a draft, then the brothers are not allowed in, because they'll come in and just be brothers. um, so like they do not come in when I am focusing on weaving.
Do you have the do not disturb sign on your door?
No.
Is there a project that like really dear to you that you would never sell, that you always want to keep for yourself?
Okay, so one time I made a poof out of or an ottoman out of recycled denim, and I, took all the time to cut the denim into strips, and then it was crocheted, so I crocheted it, and then I put a lot of time into that. And my mom and brother always pester me because it my room is full of yarn and my loom, so there's nowhere in here for it. So we have a sewing room that we call the loft, and it lives out there, and they're always pestering me because, like, whenever we reorganize out there, which we do quite often, there's always like no spot for it, and it's like always in the way. And so they're always trying to say, why don't you sell this? Because that's what I would always do.
Right.
But I've never sold the one poof, and it kicks around, and they say it'll go to college with me, and it'll probably kick around until it'll kick around forever. Yeah.
Do you see yourself making your own dresses, your own clothes, like when you, as you continue with the weaving?
Some things are just like the special projects, maybe if they're like the big project for the year. Sometimes those will usually be like those are like for fashion shows, like at fiber festivals and things. Those I won't wear on everyday use, but I do plan to make some more things that maybe I would wear more often in a little bit more daily use.
Do you plan ahead, like when you said like you have deadlines for the newsletters and stuff, like how far ahead do you plan your projects?
Well, this project that's here now isn't until for a fiber festival until next summer. So some things can definitely be, at least 6 months out. And I don't like those. I don't always like those projects because I can't tell anyone on social media.
Right.
Like the article, I can't tell anyone until the article comes out in like late October. I can't tell anyone. I really just want to tell someone. Um, but not really.
Do you find like people on Instagram or on your on your Facebook, do you find that you becoming friends with people that otherwise like you would not never even meet?
I definitely find a lot of people on social media with similar interests. There's not people as much in my area that are my age and have the same interests as me. It's very difficult to find. So social media is a great way to meet those people.
And do you ever like become friends with much older people that you like surprised by the fact that you have so much in common?
Yeah, I'm friends with a lot of people in my local guild who are not my age, but we share the same interests. And so that's where friendship comes into play.
What's your day looks like with the homeschooling and the weaving and all the stuff? Like, how do you manage your day throughout? Like, when do you study?
So we do the type of homeschooling which is called unschooling. So we don't learn from textbooks or any of that, or online courses or anything. We do take some online classes and things, like I take a leadership class, and I'm in my spinning class, but that's about it. And most of what I do is interest-based learning. So there's a lot of math in weaving, there's definitely a lot of that. I write all my articles, I do all my social media writing. So everything that I learn is learned through what I do.
Interesting. So let's say like when you go further, right? Like there is chemistry, there is physics. Like, is it still gonna be around like the dyes and the movement of the loom?
Mostly, yeah. So our what we believe is that you learn this because that's what you'll use in the future, not particularly that you're learning it at school so that you have that knowledge. But if I learn this today, then I'll always use this math. That'll be what I use forever in the future.
Right. So you mentioned that your family moved a lot. Do you find that like you, with every time you move somewhere, you learn something new, you get like new ideas?
I do find a lot of inspiration from new places. Our first place was Florida. I lived there for the first 8 years of my life, and we were so close to the ocean, and I love the ocean. We don't go as often now, but I just you can take so much inspiration from the ocean, like that sea glass piece that you brought up before. Um, and so every time it's almost like every time we move, my inspiration source changes, and every time when we go on our summer road trips that we do, that also brings new inspiration.
Do you feel like you have like a library of images in your head and that's where you draw your ideas for weaving?
I actually have a library of images in my iPad that I take I like to, when I think of a bird, I will look up that bird and I'll take a screenshot of it, and then or garments, like sewing patterns and things. And so all of that goes into screenshots on my iPad.
Like when you travel, is that like part of your learning experience? Like you feel like that's how you learn also?
That is definitely part of it. Uh, One of the recent geography things that I learned a lot about was the local guilds that I did here, that I'm a part of here. We studied a global breed study pack where we purchased, an ounce of each of all these breeds, and then someone every month would do a presentation on that breed. So there was this one sheep called North Ronaldsay, and it comes from North Ronaldsay Island, and they actually only eat seaweed. That is the main part of their diet. And so there was a lot to learn from that package. We also started this new one on luxury fibers, which one of them, we only just got into it, but one of them was camel. And there was actually a lot to learn about camels and where they come from and all of that.
So is it like, is their fleece like different depending on the location where they're coming from?
Definitely, yeah. It depends on their breeding and their diet and their treatment and all of that. But that definitely affects the quality and the differences in the fiber.
Is there like a place you want to visit just to touch the particular animal?
Um, does everywhere count? I could spend a year just like going around and meeting all the sheep of all different varieties.
Yeah, because I was talking to Vivica. She's from Uredale Farms in Shetland, and they grow organically Shetland sheep there. And it was very interesting because they basically brought back the old breed of Shetland sheep. And depending on the color, like some colors, the white ones that's like in more demand, they only can be pastured like on the milder climates. But then the darker ones can go into the hills and like eat the seaweed and like be completely wild for like half a year.
Really?
So
Wow.
it's like it was very interesting also to learn. So my dream is to go there and like see those sheep in the wilderness, for myself. And Shetland ponies, they're so cute.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so very much for being my guest today. I loved getting to know you, and I wish you all the best of luck. I can't wait to see that article that's so secret right now and to see what you're gonna come up with.
Thank you. I'm so glad I was able to come on here.